A widower lived alone for years, until 10 giant women rode in asking for shelter. Ezra Stone sat at his kitchen table, staring at the empty chair across from him. Mary's chair, 2 years empty, but he still set 2 plates every evening out of habit. The coffee had gone cold an hour ago, but moving felt like admitting she wasn't coming home. Shadows fell across the windows, enormous shadows that blocked out the setting sun. Ezra looked up from his untouched supper. Through the glass, he saw shapes moving outside his cabin, shapes too tall to be human, too big to be real. The sound of horses reached him, heavy hoofbeats, multiple riders, but the shadows on his walls belonged to giants. A knock at his door, 3 measured raps that shook the wooden frame. Ezra grabbed his rifle from above the fireplace and approached the door cautiously. "Who's there?" "Travelers seeking shelter." The voice was deep, feminine, and tired. Ezra cracked the door open and found himself looking up at a woman who stood nearly 7 feet tall. Behind her, 9 more women of similar stature sat on horses, their rifles visible and ready. "Ma'am, I'm Magdalena Crane. We need a place to rest." Ezra opened the door wider, taking in the full sight of them, the Crane sisters and their cousins. He'd heard stories about the giant women from the valley, but seeing them in person was different. They were real, and they were afraid. "You're a long way from home." "Don't have a home anymore." "What happened?" "Men with badges and bad intentions burned us out." Magdalena dismounted, her boots hitting the ground with authority. Even bent slightly forward from exhaustion, she towered over Ezra. "Sheriff Baxter? You know him?" "Know of him." "What did you do to earn his attention?" "Refuse to sell our land." The other women dismounted, their movements careful and coordinated despite their fatigue. Ezra counted 10 total. The youngest looked barely 20, the oldest maybe 60. All of them unnaturally tall, all of them armed. "Where you planning to go?" "North. Maybe across the territorial line." "That's a hard ride." "Everything's hard when you're running." Magdalena gestured to her companions. "We lost our grandmother and great-aunt in the fire. Baxter's men called them witches. Said our size made us unnatural. I'm sorry for your loss." "Sorry doesn't bring back the dead." One of the younger women spoke up. "Magdalena, we can't stay here long. They'll track us." "Hush, Helena." Helena Crane stepped forward, nearly as tall as her sister, but leaner. "Mr. Stone, your wife used to bring us supplies. Back when the town wouldn't trade with us." Ezra's grip tightened on his rifle. "You knew Mary? She was kind to us. Treated us like people instead of curiosities." "Mary's dead." "We heard. Riding accident, they said." "That's what they said." Magdalena studied Ezra's face. "But you don't believe it. Mary was the best rider in 3 counties. Doesn't make sense she'd fall off her horse on a clear day. Lots of things don't make sense when Baxter's involved." Helena nodded. "Your wife was bringing us medicine when it happened. Said she'd found something important. Something about Baxter." Ezra's blood chilled. "What kind of something?" "Papers. Letters. Evidence of things he'd done to other families. She never told me about any papers." "Maybe she was protecting you." Magdalena interrupted. "We can't stand here talking all night. Either you're helping us or you're not." Ezra looked at the 10 women, their faces gaunt with hunger and fear. Mary would have helped them without question. Mary had been helping them. "How long since you ate?" 2 days. "Come inside. I'll make coffee." "You sure about this?" "No, but I'm doing it anyway." They filed into his cabin, ducking through the doorway. Inside, they seemed even larger, their heads nearly touching the low ceiling. Ezra had built this place for 2 normal-sized people. 10 giants made it feel like a dollhouse. Sorry about the space. We're used to not fitting. Ezra put coffee on the stove and started pulling food from his pantry. Bread, dried meat, canned beans, everything he had. "This is too much," Helena said. "It's what I got." Magdalena sat heavily in Mary's chair. The wood creaked but held. "Your wife mentioned you might be sympathetic to our situation." "What situation?" "Being different. being hated for things you can't control. I'm not different. You're a widower who lives alone on a mountain. That makes you different enough. Outside, wind rattled the windows. But underneath the wind, Ezra heard something else. The distant sound of horses climbing the mountain trail. Helena heard it too. They found us. Magdalena stood, her hand moving to her rifle. How far behind? Maybe an hour. Ezra walked to the window and peered down the mountainside. Torchlight flickered in the distance, moving slowly but steadily upward. That Baxter? Probably. How many men? Enough. Ezra turned back to the women. You can stay tonight. But come morning, we figure out what to do about Sheriff Baxter. Magdalena nodded. Fair enough. And Helena? Yes, sir. Tell me more about those papers my wife found. Helena exchanged glances with her sister. After we eat, and after we're sure we'll live through the night. Outside, the torches grew brighter. Dawn came gray and cold. Ezra woke to the sound of horses surrounding his cabin. Through the window, he counted at least 15 men with rifles and badges. Sheriff Baxter sat his horse at the front, his face hard as granite. The Crane women were already awake, positioned at windows with their weapons ready. Magdalena crouched beside the front door, her rifle trained on Baxter's chest. Ezra Stone. Baxter's voice carried across the yard. Send out the fugitives. Ezra opened the door halfway. What fugitives? Don't play stupid. The Crane witches. I know they're in there. These women haven't done anything wrong. They murdered 2 of my deputies. That's a lie, Helena called from the window. Baxter spurred his horse closer. They resisted arrest. Killed good men. Your good men burned down our home, Magdalena shouted back. Your home was a den of unnatural practices. We cleanse it. Ezra stepped outside, hands raised but ready. What do you really want, Baxter? Justice. And land rights. Land rights. The Crane property sits on the richest copper vein in the territory. They refuse to sell. Magdalena emerged from the cabin, towering over both men. Because it's not for sale. It's been our family land for 3 generations. 3 generations of freaks. Baxter spat. We're not freaks. We're just tall. Unnaturally tall. Against God's design. Helena joined her sister. Our height comes from our bloodline. Rare but natural. Nothing natural about 7-foot women. Ezra looked between the sisters and the sheriff. So you burned them out for copper? I burned them out because they're abominations. The copper is just a bonus. Magdalena reached into her coat and pulled out a leather folder. Show him, Helena. Helena nodded and pulled out a stack of letters tied with ribbon. These belong to your wife. Ezra's heart stopped. Mary's letters? She hid them before she died. Asked us to keep them safe. Safe from what? From Sheriff Baxter. Magdalena opened the folder. Inside were documents, maps, and correspondence. Your wife discovered Baxter's been killing families and stealing their land for years. That's impossible. Is it? How many families have mysteriously died or disappeared in the past 5 years? Ezra thought about it. The Henderson family, killed by bandits. The Martinez clan died in a house fire. The Johnson brothers, found dead in their mine. Mary was documenting all of it, Helena continued. She figured out the pattern. What pattern? Every family that died owned mineral-rich land. Every death was suspicious. Every property ended up in Baxter's hands. Ezra stared at the papers. Mary's handwriting covered page after page. Names, dates, suspicious circumstances. She was going to take this to the territorial marshal, Magdalena said, but she never made it, because Baxter killed her first. The words hit Ezra like a physical blow. The riding accident was an accident. Baxter's men ambushed her on Miller's Pass. How do you know? Because we saw it happen. We're too far away to help. Ezra's hands shook as he held Mary's letters. 2 years of grief and guilt rewriting themselves in his mind. She died protecting this evidence. She died fighting for justice. Baxter's voice cut through their conversation. Enough talking. Stone, you got 10 seconds to send them out. Or what? Or you burn with them. Ezra looked at the letters, at the women who'd risked everything to preserve his wife's work, at the corrupt sheriff who destroyed so many families. Magdalena. Yeah. How long you been fighting this man? 2 years. Ever since they murdered our grandmother. And you plan to keep fighting? Until he's dead, or we are. What if I helped? Helena stepped closer. You don't owe us anything. I owe Mary. I owe every family he's killed. Baxter fired a warning shot. Time's up, Stone. I got an answer for you, Sheriff. Let's hear it. Go to hell. Baxter's face twisted with rage. Burn them out, boys. The Crane women moved with practiced efficiency. Magdalena and Helena began stacking furniture against windows. The other sisters positioned themselves at strategic points around the cabin. You sure about this? Magdalena asked Ezra. No, but Mary would be. This might be our last stand. Then we make it count. Ezra looked around his cabin. Mary's chair, Mary's dishes, Mary's curtains. Memories of a life that felt like someone else's dream. He walked to the fireplace and started feeding Mary's furniture into the flames. The chair she'd sat in every evening. The table where they'd eaten their meals. The chest where she'd kept her wedding dress. What are you doing? Helena asked, making room to fight. The furniture burned bright and hot. Smoke poured from the chimney while Ezra cleared battle positions for women twice his size. She wants us to win, he said quietly. Then we will... Outside, Baxter's men closed in with torches and guns. Inside, Giant prepared for war. The first torch hit the cabin's east wall. Flames licked at the dry wood while Baxter's men positioned themselves behind rocks and trees. Ezra crouched beside the window, rifle ready. They're trying to smoke us out, Magdalena said. Let them try. Helena aimed carefully and fired. One of Baxter's men stumbled backward, clutching his shoulder. Nice shot. Papa taught us to hunt. More torches flew. The cabin filled with smoke, but the thick logs held against the flames. Ezra had built this place to last. How much ammunition we got? Enough for a siege. Good, because here they come. Baxter's men charged from 3 directions. The Crane women fired with devastating accuracy. Their unusual height giving them better angles through the windows. Bodies dropped in the yard. Fall back. Baxter screamed. Regroup. In the temporary quiet, Ezra heard something that made his heart leap. Distant bugle calls. Military signals. You hear that? Magdalena cocked her head. Federal cavalry. Through the smoke, riders appeared on the ridge. Blue uniforms, federal badges. Enough firepower to level the mountain. Marshal Davidson. A voice boomed across the valley. Federal warrant for Sheriff Baxter. Baxter's face went white. How did they know? Helena smiled grimly. Your wife's letters made it through after all. What letters? The one she sent before you killed her. Took 2 years, but federal justice moves slow and sure. Marshal Davidson rode closer, flanked by 20 armed men. Sheriff Baxter, you're under arrest for murder, land theft, and conspiracy. This is my jurisdiction. Not anymore, it isn't. Baxter looked around wildly. Half his men were dead, the other half facing federal rifles. He was trapped between the cabin and the cavalry. Stone, Baxter called. Come out here. Why? Because I got something to say. Ezra opened the door cautiously. Baxter had his gun drawn, but pointed at the ground. Walk over here. Slow. I'm fine where I am. I said come here. Ezra stepped into the yard. Behind him, Magdalena kept her rifle trained on Baxter's head. That's far enough, Baxter said. What do you want? Same thing I always wanted. To clean up this territory. By murdering innocent families? By removing unnatural elements. Baxter's gun came up fast, pressing against Ezra's temple. Marshal Davidson. Call off your men or Stone dies. Let him go, Baxter. Not until you ride away. Ezra felt the cold metal against his skin. You're not getting out of this. Watch me. Mary died for justice. Don't make her sacrifice meaningless. Your wife died because she couldn't mind her own business. The shot cracked like thunder. Baxter's body jerked, blood spreading across his chest. He dropped his gun and fell backward, dead before he hit the ground. Magdalena lowered her rifle. Nobody threatens our friends. Jesus, that was a hell of a shot. Told you Papa taught us to hunt. Marshal Davidson approached with his men, weapons lowered. Ma'am, that was justified defense of a hostage. Figured it was. Sheriff Baxter's been wanted by federal authorities for 2 years. Your wife's evidence finally reached us. Ezra knelt beside Baxter's body. Good. Mary can rest now. The surviving deputies surrendered without resistance. Davidson's men began collecting evidence from the scene, while the marshal took statements from the Crane women. You ladies are cleared of all charges. In fact, you're entitled to compensation for wrongful persecution. We just want our land back. You'll get it, plus damages. 3 months later, Ezra stood in the valley where the Crane homestead once stood. New buildings rose from the ashes, designed for people of unusual stature. Tall doorways, high ceilings, reinforced foundations. Hand me that beam, Magdalena called from the roof. Ezra lifted the heavy timber, muscles straining. At 53, he was too old for construction work, but purpose made him strong. How's it look up there? Like home. The federal government had awarded the Crane family triple damages for their stolen land. They'd used the money to build a sanctuary for families victimized by corrupt officials, a place where being different wasn't a crime. Helena sat on the porch, reading from Mary's letters to a group of children, survivors from other families Baxter had destroyed. Listen to this one, Helena said. Dear friends, remember that justice delayed is not justice denied. Truth has its own timeline and righteousness its own rewards. Ezra paused in his work. Even in death, Mary's words brought comfort. She was a wise woman, Magdalena said, climbing down from the roof. She was everything. Still is. Look around. Ezra surveyed the valley. Families working together. Children playing safely. Homes built to accommodate all sizes and needs. Mary's vision made real. You did this, Magdalena continued. You and her letters. We all did this. True enough. As evening fell, the Crane women gathered for supper. Ezra took his place at their oversized table, no longer alone, no longer haunted by empty chairs. Helena, read us one more letter. Which one? The last one she wrote. Helena opened the worn pages. My beloved husband, if you're reading this, then truth has won its battle against corruption. Take care of the Crane family. They're good people who've suffered enough. Build something beautiful from the ashes of injustice. Love endures, even when we cannot. Ezra smiled, finally at peace. Among giants, he'd found his true size.